All the hubbub of what the Chiefs have to do this offseason. Where is Nick Bolton in all of it today? On Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next one because we are free and available 5 days a week plus, as is every other show on the network. And you probably need to get into the draft and some other things right now. Check out the Draft News, the NFL Draft Show, as well as all the shows around the league. We're excited about today because one guy isn't being talked about enough, in my opinion, right now, that is a free agent, a leader on this roster. How are they going to deal with the Nick Bolton situation? We are going to discuss that today as you get with us. This is Chris Clark, my partner over at KC Chiefs Corner. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. You can find me at NFL33.com and RGR Football. We have a ton to go over today. We get to the splash free agents that maybe are the right kind of fit that the Chiefs should go chase. Not necessarily high dollar, but what does that look like? That's coming up later. Should they trade up or trade down? This draft is going to be crazy, and I think the Chiefs have to move multiple times. We'll get to that theory, but we start with the unsung hero, the guy that hasn't been discussed enough of the Chiefs free agent class. It is on defense. Nick Bolton has been a centerpiece for this defense, making plays. The first Super Bowl against the Eagles stands out clear as day and is not getting even discussed very much in the open media, as well as from what I hear from the combine. It looks like it's going to be a test the market kind of situation, at least as we understand right now. What do you expect the market to be for Nick Bolton?
It's tough. If he wants to be paid like a top linebacker, that's going to be almost impossible, I would think. Like, he has a great skill set. He has from everything the coaches say, he has a photographic mind. So that really helps him. And it becomes especially important for somebody like him. The problem he's going to face is, while he is still young, and he is still young enough to get this contract and play through the entirety of the contract and still be considered a relatively young player, once you get past this contract, it's going to get tougher, because one of his games, one of the things that has never been a thing in his game is his speed. He has always been slow, and losing a step is going to be even harder for him. One of the reasons he's able to do what he's able to do is because he can read defenses and he sees it so quickly, and he diagnoses, and his reaction is so quick. That is what his benefit is. So he absolutely needs to get paid now, because I don't think he's going to have a chance to get another contract, even though he's young enough to get a third type of contract that would be almost life-changing. The problem is that he'll be close enough to where his speed could be slowing down, and he's dealt with injuries. So that's the other part of the question, is how is he going to deal with the next 3 or 4 seasons, even with the injuries that he's had.
Yeah, I agree with you. For the long term, for Nick and his family, the time is now. It's got to be all in right now. And I do think he will have suitors. So the question for me is, what does that mean overall for this Chiefs defense? We just discussed yesterday about Justin Reed being a guy that likely is not going to return to Kansas City because of the monetary cap restrictions. Same thing with Nick Bolton. Now you're talking about the leaders at 2 levels of the defense that you're going to have to work around. And I won't even say replace, because I don't know that that's actually something you can do. The linebacker group in particular, I think, despite my hopes for Cam Jones, I don't know that he's evolved into a player that I can see as a starter on this defense next year. So that tells me that the likes of Jack Cochran, who had an injury, Christensen, Swayze Bozeman, none of these guys are starting caliber players in this league. They're all special team replacement level players, and that's fine. You have to have those. But right now, it's Drew Tranquill and it's Leo Chenal. And I like the concept of Leo going into the middle. It's what he played in college. I know that he can handle the defense and the calls and all of that. And I do think his edge and his physicality, I think, is a good thing to have in the middle of your defense. And maybe that opens it up to, instead of replacing Nick Bolton with another middle linebacker, that you can go with more of a coverage type and get more of an actual will that has that elite speed. Somebody like Willie Gay, who I think is even an option in free agency.
I was about to bring him up. I was wondering if you were going to say that. That's exactly where I was going to go, was Willie Gay. Is that maybe this is a potential situation where they move Chenal into the middle, and Willie Gay becomes the will that they, didn't have this season. I like what I saw from Tranquil outside. I like what I saw from Chanel when he played outside, but Chanel's better position, I think, is in the middle, and I do think he still gives you the ability to rush on the edge at times. And I think the other thing that I would still love to see from Chanel is him on offense more, but that's a whole different question and a whole different ball game. The reality, though, is you look at this linebacker group, and without Nick Bolton, I don't know what it's going to look like, because there's questions as to what they're going to do. Are they going to go out and get a will like you talk about with Willie Gay? Or are they going to go draft somebody to come in and be that linebacker? The problem that you have is, unless you get somebody with elite speed, you're probably going to be taking a step back at the position. And I say that because Nick Bolton's lack of speed doesn't hurt him, because, as I said, he can diagnose plays so quickly. He knows what's coming generally speaking, he knows what's coming beforehand. And he got better. I'm not going to say he got good in pass protection, but he got better throughout his career in Kansas City at pass protection. And that's helped, but it's still a hindrance. And the second he starts losing even more speed, it's going to be a big problem.
Yeah. And that's something that I think, much like we've seen some of the older linebackers around the league, when they get those big contracts, it's difficult to really live up to them, to tell you the truth. Better for the Chiefs long term to continue to replenish and get those young legs in there. And I do think that there are some prospects here that maybe aren't great middle linebackers, but are guys that can play out on the edges, particularly when I do think the pendulum is swinging back towards the run game. And so when you look at the percentage of the Chiefs, I think it ticked up 7% this year when they played in base defense versus their normal nickel. So that is becoming more and more important, to have three linebackers that you can have on the field.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big question. Can you do that? Can you continue to do that? Are you going to be able to go and find somebody to step in? And let's say that they don't go into the draft with a answer at linebacker. Let's say they don't bring in somebody and they don't re-sign Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton signs elsewhere, and they don't bring in somebody like a Willie Gay, and they don't have somebody that could step in. Then you have to figure out what you're going to do with that position. Are you going to go and draft a middle linebacker, that type of role, or are you going to go and draft a will linebacker and have Chanel play middle? That's the nice thing, is you do have versatility where you could do a little bit of both. But the other problem that you run into is Tranquil and Chanel are very limited in the amount of time they're going to still have in Kansas City. So that's also going to be a problem. Chanel has got 1 year left on his deal. They could sign him to an extension this offseason.
Yeah, and I do think that is worth it. He's one of the guys that, when I ran it down a week or two before the Super Bowl, that was going to be something that needed to be on the table, because you can't allow good talent to walk away, especially if you can do something that isn't, setting the market for a given position.
Noah Gray-esque is what I would call it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a good comparison. So the linebacker group needs some fresh blood. I think they're going to get that. But all the other needs that go in, as we just talked about on Tuesday, the big ones, it's a contrast in whether you trade up and you go for broke, or whether you're able to do enough in free agency to allow yourself to go value. And I think those are the two conversations: trade up or trade down. That's coming up next. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. We use them all the time, whether you're shopping for food or treats or even healthcare. Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. They have over 100,000 products of all your favorite brands and all your dog's favorite brands. Chewy has everything that they need, from food to toys to beds, the whole 9 yards. They got great suppliers, even for birds and fish and reptiles. I know a lot of you have some of those. Chewy makes it easy to manage your pet's health, the prescriptions, the telehealth visits, and even in-person vet clinics if you need that, nationwide. AutoShip is a total game changer. It sets you up for automatic deliveries of food, of treats, and any essentials in case you ever run out. You easily can change that and cancel at any given time. Chewy has everything you need for your pet to keep them happy and healthy. Right now, you can get $20 off of your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's chewy.com/LockedOnNFL to save $20 on your first order with free shipping. That's Chewy, CHEWY.com/LockedOnNFL. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions do apply. See the site for complete details. Okay, this is the fun part. When we get to wonder about not the premier positions, not the offensive tackles, not the edge rushers or the shutdown corners, but the guys that the Chiefs had to fit in the puzzle to fill in those gaps. So we're going to look at free agents that we think could probably fill some holes, give them the depth that they need, and get them to the point where they can withstand some attrition and get back to another Super Bowl.
Yeah, and we're going to look at that in the next segment where we're going to talk trades up or trades down right now.
I'd like to preview. You know, you got to do it as you go through the show. Yeah.
Fine. Preview it all you want.
I'm looking forward to that one. If you guys can't tell, I'm really into like who could be a great fit. It's not much of a question for me this year, so I will leave it to you. Just flipping a coin, trying to get done what you have to get done. Is trading up the better scenario for you? Just as you said, not staying at 31. Trade up or trade down? What's the better scenario?
This is a complicated question. And to be clear, I want to ask you a question before I answer, because I want to set up the listener to know as much as we possibly can about all of this. Really quick, Chiefs have the 31st pick, the 63rd pick, 66th, which is the second pick in the third round, 95, 132, and 256. They have 6 picks this year. How many first-round picks do you think you're going to have grades on? How many picks in this draft do you think you'll have first-round grades on?
That's a good one. Usually I have somewhere between 17 and 20. I'm thinking it's probably going to be like 22 this year. Okay. And I generally run pretty consistent with the Chiefs. Obviously, when I do my board, it isn't specific to their scheme as much as theirs. So I would say for the Chiefs, they could end up in that right around 20-ish range.
So that makes it a little bit different than some of the other drafts that we've had in the past couple of years, where it's very high in talent, but then you have a bunch of guys that are looked at more as second-round type players versus first-round type players. So to me, I look at this draft and I say, okay, what are your big needs? Obviously, I think you could always say wide receiver is a need. Rashee Rice, you have great. Xavier Worthy, I think, showed that he has talent and can do something. But you also know that you're going to be without Travis Kelce in the very near future, and that's going to change your offense. So having a legitimate third wide receiver that can step in and maybe be a guy that can be that alpha that they don't really have at that position right now could be something that they would look at. I don't know that one's going to drop. I know a lot of people would love Luther Burton in Kansas City. Don't see how that's going to happen. But the other side of it to me is I think that you have to look at offensive line. If they have a chance to go get a tackle, I think you have to look at it. And I think that moving up makes the most sense. Even though you don't have the draft picks to do it this year, you do have an extra third-round pick that is basically a second-round pick from the Tennessee Titans. So that can get you up a little bit. And the reason I asked you how many players there are is because in most drafts, you will be in a situation where if you're picking at 30, you're going to get a guy you have a second-round grade on. Mm-hmm. In this draft, I'm not sure that's the case. Is it possible that you will get a guy with a second-round grade? Yes. It's also possible that there are enough teams that are going to go reach on players that they have different grades on that you could end up getting really close at 31 to getting a guy that has a first-round grade for you. Is that going to be at a position that you really need? That's going to be the big question.
It definitely will be the question. And for me, it's super clear. It's not a question at all. And it's counterintuitive to what I usually say. So those of you who've listened to this show for years and years and years, hold on. It's not the end of the world, but this will sound a little strange.
Hell is freezing over.
The Chiefs need to use their first and second and maybe a tertiary pick to move up into the teens this year right now. They tried to do it last year for Mary Simmons. They couldn't get it done. They've tried to do it in the past several times. Couldn't get it done. You have to find that person. And my guess is Brett Veach has been doing this most of the season, kind of laying the groundwork for who could be in position to have a pick that they really need in order to give it away. And now that you have 63 and 66, those are a wash to me. I don't see any difference. So you might as well give them the second round pick. I don't care. You have to go get the left tackle that can stop this thing that we just saw. The Achilles heel of this offense and of Patrick Mahomes is not protecting him. It's got to be sold out for. I'm not ready to give up a first-round pick from next season, but the first and second from this year, knowing that you have 66 in the bag, maybe you have to throw in 132, or maybe you have to go that far. That's how important that is for me.
And it becomes even more important because you have Patrick Mahomes through 2031, and likely you probably have him his entire career if you want him. So to me, this is a move of we're going to get our left tackle that we believe is going to be our guy, and he's going to be our guy for the next 10 years. And you can just figure that after 3 years, they're going to sign him to an extension. They have to have that guy. They have to have somebody that they believe can be their guy for the foreseeable future. Because the reality is you can look back at Kingsley Suamataia and you could say it was a bad pick. Whatever. I'm not going to call him a bust yet. No,
Yeah.
I have a point here. I'm not going to call him a bust. I know a lot of people will say he's a bust right now, but even if he doesn't become the left tackle of the future, there is still value there if he can become a guy that can plug in and go and maybe take a Joe Tooney's place at left guard. Or if you have an issue with not being able to get Trey Smith on a long-term deal, he becomes the right guard. Or maybe next year he becomes the starting right tackle. Who knows what's going to happen with Jawan Taylor? There's lots of different things that can play into why Kingsley Suamataia is not a bust at this point. He's 21 years old, or at least he was when he was drafted. I'm not sure if he's turned 22, but he is a young kid. Give him time to develop. I do think that that's something that if you look at it, I think he still has the talent to play in the NFL. I just don't think he was ready, and that's fine. It's not the best situation, but what are you going to do? I mean, you have to move on, and there's nothing wrong with going and getting another guy that you think can be that left tackle, but you have to hit on it, and you have to be willing to move up and go get him. The problem Kansas City is going to run into is the same problem they run into every single year.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to trade with him. Nobody, except for Buffalo, and Buffalo isn't going to be drafting high enough for it to matter. But thank you, Buffalo, because I still like the Xavier Worthy pick, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you, Brandon. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's a fair point.
And Patrick Mahomes, obviously. Sorry.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, you have to go get that. Finding that partner is the hard part, but I do believe there's a better chance this year than there was last year. I truly believe that. Now everybody's kind of like, oh, look, you dropped a Super Bowl. You're not invincible. Oh, I can wheel and deal a little bit more with you, which I think is perfect and probably their downfall. So that said, we have to be able to fill in the cracks. What are the free agent splash players the Chiefs should be looking at? That's coming up next. Okay. Puzzle pieces. I'm a little overexcited about this piece, so forgive me in my my willingness to jump in.
As you showed last segment, I understand.
So the point of the exercise is to find not the thing that they have to go do, as we just talked about with the offensive line correction. Guys that can bring impact to the roster that are in other positions not named left tackle and not quarterback, obviously. So start wherever you like. What do you feel like is a spot, and then maybe a player that can fill that in and do something to raise the whole level of the roster up?
Man, giving you a name is the tough part. Positions, sure. I can go multiple different positions. Running back, I think, is one that you can throw out there and just say if they can get a guy, and it doesn't have to be a full-time starter. That's the thing. Like, it can be a role player. It can be a third down back type guy that can go out there that has legitimate speed but can catch the ball really well. Think of James Cook a couple of years ago, what Buffalo used him to start his career. That's kind of the thought process as to where I would go in that regard. I'm not talking, obviously, it's not going to be James Cook, but that type of player, I do think would have a huge benefit in Kansas City. So that's kind of the direction I would go when you look at the offense. The other one that I would say is that I think you have to look at the tight end group. And I think you have to just say, okay, is there anybody out there that could come in? I know they like Hendershot. Obviously, they like Noah Gray. They just signed him into an extension. but generally this team has gone with 4 tight ends. You're going to have Travis Kelce, and is it possible that you can bring in another guy? Obviously, they have Wiley from last year, so maybe they don't feel like they need it. But at the same time, Hendershot is a guy that they got for basically nothing. They could go and find another tight end, and if it's somebody that they think can step in and do something that they don't have on the roster outside of Travis Kelce, it's worth it.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's worth taking those shots, especially at this level when we're talking about contracts that aren't going to break the bank, that aren't going to prevent something else from happening. A couple of guys do stand out to me. One starts with, and it's not because he's in the same draft class that Willie Gay is, although I do like Willie Gay's game. I'm not certain where Willie is in terms of the aftermath of playing for the Saints, but I do think he's available, and I do think it's a possibility. But the guy that everyone was hyped about in that class with Willie, that was nearly as athletic, was right behind Willie Gay in the athletic matrix, was Isaiah Simmons, who has not panned out in this league and has had multiple stops now, we know, but he still has the versatility that Spags loves. Think of Isaiah Simmons as a much, much, much more athletic version of Dan Sorensen, because he can play safety and he can come and be a nickel linebacker. He's got experience now at this point. He's still a good athlete, no serious injuries for him. So if you gave me Dan Sorensen where you had to expose him a little bit more, try to bring out his instincts, but he had 2 or 3 times the power up on the athleticism side, I would take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and I think that could be a great move. They need to address that linebacker position, and they're going to have to figure something out there. There's multiple different positions that they could go. Linebacker's one of them. We've talked about defensive line. We've talked about defensive tackle. They still need a defensive end. Is there somebody out there that is not named Charles Omenihu that can come in and step in and play a role in Kansas City? I'm sure there is. I don't have great names right now, because the reality is when you start looking, and I'm sure you probably do, but the reality is when you start looking at some of these, you don't know what the market is going to be.
Right.
Because there's just there's no telling what some of these guys will get on the open market, because the market isn't determined currently. I'm sure the NFL has some idea as to what they think that these guys will get paid based on previous contracts, but go back and look at guys like Christian Kirk, who didn't deserve anywhere near the money he got at wide receiver, and really set a lot of the market back at that position. If you get that at other positions like linebacker, that's going to cause ripple effects as well, or defensive ends, or whatever other position that we could discuss.
Yeah. I mean, there's value positions, right? We've talking all week about wide receiver, left tackle. Left tackle, one of the 4 pillar positions that you have to have. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but there's another ex-Saint. This might be the offseason of the ex-Saints for us. I don't know. But a guy that I had pegged as a supreme fit for Steve Spagnuolo's system is coming up as a 26-year-old free agent. Peyton Turner, played at Houston, coming off the edge, can come inside when you need him, plays with good length. Hasn't gotten a whole lot of wear down there. He is a guy that will come in for a vet min. You're not going to have to spend the bank on him. And I think in this system, it might allow him to reach the next level. There's another one that plays with him there, and this is perfect Brett Veach. I think I may have mentioned it before, but I'm going to do it again. Brett Veach likes to salvage first-round picks. Chase Young has done nothing to live up to his reputation, but if he now hits that second marker, you could grab both those guys for a song and maybe pay a total less than you paid Charles Omenihu this year.
Man, if they could pull that off. And I want to be clear, I don't think it was last week. I think it was the week before. I did a show by myself, and I talked specifically about the draft, about the cap. One of the things I said is that you can redo Chris Jones's contract, and you can use the money from his contract to specifically address the defensive line. And it doesn't necessarily have to be defensive tackle, although that's what I was talking about, because I talked about bringing back Pennell and Noddy and those types of guys, and even maybe Turk Wharton if the price was right, although I just don't see how that's possible. But the reality is it doesn't have to be those types of guys. It could be a Chase Young. It could be a Peyton Turner if you can get them for less than what I think that they would go for. I think Peyton Turner maybe you can get for a vet min deal. Chase Young, I don't think you will, just because of the name. Now, is it right that he will get more money than he probably should? No, but that's just reality of NFL and getting to free agency. So somebody's probably going to be willing to bet money on him. And if they're in a good cap situation, it doesn't really cost them to do it. Yeah, it costs them cash and cap, but if they're chasing something, that could make a big difference. I'll see on Chase Young. I would be interested in that one.
Right?
Both
Can't
of those
hurt.
guys, I think, would. Yeah, I mean, think about that. If you had George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, Peyton Turner, and Chase Young going into the season as your defensive ends, I think you'd be very happy.
Yeah, just rotate, right? Eventually it will click with somebody. Now, Turner finished on a bit higher note. I just wanted to check his snap count. He was very limited the first year. Last year played 335 snaps, which was more than the total of the 3 years combined before that. So career high in pressures. And again, I think playing out of a system that with Joe Cullen and Steve Spagnuolo, I think could really maximize him. And the cheap investment is what I'm here for. So just another idea. We'll see if it comes to fruition. And we will continue to dig through the pile for you guys and give you some more ideas as well.
And I want to go back to say what you said on Tuesday. Corner is another position I think that you could be looking at. And it doesn't have to be a starter. It doesn't have to be a high caliber starter. It just has to be somebody that can step in and fill a role. And I think that that's going to be something that they absolutely need. And safety is going to be something that if it's the right player and the right type of, like, they have to try to stay young. They have to try to stay cheap. So that's the problem when you start talking about some of these other positions. Can you sign a safety that fits that role? Potentially, I think, but you also have to be very cognizant. You can't tie up a lot of money into that specific position, even though you don't have any money in that position currently. But you just can't really sink money into it because you're going to have to sink money into the offensive line more than likely.
You know what?
Still waiting on, Trey Smith and Joe Tooney, and what are they going to do with all that stuff? And
when you have the golden child at quarterback, you can't put him in a rental car. It's got to be like top of the line Cadillac, and that's the way the offensive line just has to be at this point. Other sacrifices have to be made.
Yep. And Spagnuolo has shown that he has the ability to do it if he knows the players and he knows them well. He's shown he has the ability to make a defense good, even if the sum doesn't look that great on paper.
Yeah, and it may not. We're going to continue to look at free agents here as we approach when the frenzy will begin. Some targeted acquisitions, I think, are in the Chiefs' future, and we're going to try to shine a light on some of those as we go forward through the next couple of weeks. So make sure that you're here 5 days a week with us because we're here for you that same length. We will be back with you tomorrow to run it down yet again. Do not miss that one. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.